Hey, and welcome back to the Kristan Hawkins Show. Today, we're going to talk about a New York law that you probably haven't heard about, but you need to know about. It forces private employers to pay for parental leave, which sounds like a good thing, but hold your horses because it's in New York. And in New York, all roads always lead to abortion. With President Trump's inauguration right around the corner, it's time to look back and bid good riddance to the most pro-abortion president of our lifetime. I'm going to talk about the trash abortion legacy Joe Biden is leaving the United States now to clean up. I can guarantee history books are not going to look too kindly over the last 4 years. And finally, there's this free speech case you don't want to miss that's happening in Texas. I have the Sparknotes version of what you need to know about as this is heading to the Supreme Court. I'm really excited to watch it unfold because it will have big implications for how we pass laws to protect our children. So let's jump right in. On January 1st, a New York law mandating paid parental leave for the private sector employees went officially into effect. Sounds like a great thing. We want parental leave in the pro-life movement, right? Babies and families and mothers thrive when they have parental leave. But a deeper dive into this law doesn't make it sound so great. A New York State fact sheet about the new law explains, quote, starting January 1st, 2025, all employees working in the private sector, note how they left out government employees. The government likes to pass rules, but they never want to apply to themselves. I'll go back. Quote, are covered by the New York State paid parental leave law. All full-time, part-time, private sector employees, including employees who are overtime exempt, are entitled to 20 hours of paid parental leave per year. No government employees at the federal, state, or local levels are covered by the law. See, told you. This law is strictly designed to force private sector employees, which is going to include all private companies, individual employers, LLCs, nonprofits in the state of New York to pay for this extra time off. It gives them 20 additional hours above the normal paid medical leave that they already have. And they're calling it prenatal care. But pay attention because I'm going to read for you the list of what the law says is covered in these 20 hours. Physical examinations, fine. Medical procedures, seems okay. Monitoring, testing, discussions with a healthcare provider needed to ensure healthy pregnancy, great. Here we go. End of pregnancy care and fertility treatment. Everything was going great till those last two bullet points, right? Putting aside religious differences on the morality of artificial fertility treatments like IVF, there's no question that IVF treatments in general cause human beings who are in the embryonic stage to be discarded and killed through selective reduction abortions. But I don't want to talk about that today. I've done podcasts on IVF in the past. I'm sure I'll be doing it in the future to educate ourselves on that. But what I want to talk about is that bullet point, end of pregnancy care. Now, that bullet point could mean miscarriage care, meaning a child has died in the womb and the child must be removed to save the life of the mother. Could totally mean that. However, why wouldn't they have just said miscarriage care? Why did they say end of pregnancy care? Well, think about the context. Think about where it's been passed. New York State. From what I can find and what from others can find is it's going to include abortion. The Denton's law firm has the same suspicion that I do. They said, quote, this paid leave covers end of pregnancy care, presumably including abortion procedures and related appointments. That's it. Because end of pregnancy, when you have an abortion and you kill the child living inside of you, you are ending a pregnancy. Knowing New York State, this is exactly what they want to do. They're trying to make a specific carve out to force even pro-life nonprofits, religious nonprofits, maybe religious Catholic schools to pay for abortion time off. I mean, no doubt about it. New York State loves, and I mean loves abortion. And I'm so sorry if you live in New York State. I've traveled all through New York State. There are some beautiful parts of New York State, parts that you can drive through and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in Pennsylvania or I'm in New Hampshire. It's amazing. but New York State loves abortion. And your taxpayer dollars, if you live in New York State, are paying for abortion. Let me just walk you down memory lane a little bit to show you all of New York's love for abortion. It goes way back to the beginning when it comes to abortion. Abortion was actually legal in New York State before Roe versus Wade was handed down in 1973. We're talking 1965, 1970, okay? Legal. Bernard Nathanson, one of the most famous converts to the pro-life movement, co-founder of NARAL, the National Association for Repeal Abortion Laws, which became NARAL Pro-Choice America, which is now another name. I can't even say something about freedom. They're using their new term du jour. Bernard Nathanson was an abortionist in New York State committing abortions before Roe versus Wade was handed down. We know that 122,700 babies were killed in abortions in New York State in 2023. And those were just the abortions that were reported by the pro-abortion Guttmacher Institute. We also know Planned Parenthood, founded by Margaret Sanger, the eugenicist, was founded in New York State over 100 years ago and still has its national headquarters there in Manhattan. I mean, PP is everywhere, but there's a reason they chose to stay in New York State. New York celebrated its horrifying 2019 law, which legalized abortion up until the moment of birth by I don't know if you all remember this. I remember this picture. They lit up landmarks in Manhattan to celebrate pink. So One World Trade Center actually turned pink, really should have been red for the innocent blood, to celebrate the killing of children. This law actually that was handed down, that Governor Cuomo signed, was the reason I finally said that enough is enough. We're launching Students for Life Action, our political arm, taking young people to state capitals and to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. to advocate for pro-life laws. New York's current Attorney General continues to brag that New Yorkers have a, quote, absolute right to abortion. She literally has gone on record bragging that minors can get an abortion with absolutely zero parental knowledge or involvement, and insurance is forced to cover abortion in her state. She's also been attacking the pregnancy centers in the state of New York, calling them fake clinics, and has a campaign urging New Yorkers to avoid them. New York Governor Kathy Hochul claims she's championing this paid parental leave law because she cares about pregnant women. But if she really cares about pregnant women, why is the state attacking and continues attacking? There's a lawsuit right now, pregnancy centers in the state. If she really believes, as of what she said, no pregnant woman in New York should be forced to choose between a paycheck and a checkup, why then are they attacking pregnancy centers? These centers where women can go for free resources, women who don't want to have abortions. Why is New York telling them not to go there? And it's so true that a majority of moms don't want an abortion. Contrary to what feminists and the abortion industry constantly tell us and claim and shove down our throats, our friends at Human Coalition talk to moms who are actively seeking abortion. And in one of their studies, they actually found that 76% of pregnant women said that they would prefer to parent if their circumstances were different. And these are from abortion-seeking women. Governor Hochul can make it easier for a woman to parent if that was her goal, but it's not. So back to the parental leave law. And this is why we should look at this with skepticism. The fact is, abortion is not explicitly excluded as a procedure covered by the law. So normally when we pass laws in the pro-life movement or we're writing legislation in the pro-life movement, we always, you always want to explicitly exclude something. So when we're passing a law saying, in Oklahoma, for example, when we passed our first Life at Conception Act, which says no abortions are legal here, no exceptions, and there's criminal penalties for abortionists who commit them. We had to explicitly exclude miscarriage care. So we didn't want any woman going to an ER who's clearly has had a miscarriage, her child has died within her, not being able to receive a D&C if she needs a D&C to empty her uterus of this deceased child, the placental tissue, so she doesn't become septic. We always have to explicitly exclude that, even though the abortion lobby claims that, pro-life laws kill women and women can't get miscarriage care. That's always blatantly false, because every time we write and pass legislation in the pro-life movement, we always explicitly write in the exclusions to this. So there's no question or doubt. But they didn't do that in New York. They could have. They know they should do that, but they didn't. Why? Because this is a sneaky, sneaky way to force all private employers, including pro-life, religious, nonprofits, including businesses run by pro-life businessmen and women, that they have to force abortion. It's just another way to force abortion using, taxpayer dollars. And honestly, I'm really eager to see what the conscience protections lawsuits will come out of this say, because this is something that is 100% attacking the conscience rights of Christians and pro-lifers in the state of New York. All right, now let's recap some of the damage Joe Biden has done during his disastrous 4 years as president of the United States for the pro-life movement, and more importantly, for all the preborn babies. Thank goodness this presidency is finally over, and we are in the new era. We are celebrating here at Hawkins House in Idaho, but we can never forget the damage that has been done in these past 4 years. It's crazy. I mean, speaking of loving abortion, like New York State, maybe Joe Biden can give New York State a run for their money, because I don't know who loves abortion more. In the last 4 years, Joe Biden expanded deadly chemical abortion pills, prosecuted peaceful pro-life advocates, and selected a vice president, and then had her run for president, who is so pro-abortion that she literally had the apartment of a pro-life journalist raided with guns drawn while she was Attorney General of California to seize undercover footage that would hurt her campaign donors and friends at Planned Parenthood. Joe Biden has been a radical on abortion, but he wasn't always like this. Here's a montage of Biden's pro-life comments over the decades. You may be shocked to hear that this is the same man who's been president for the past 4 years.
I'm prepared to accept that the moment of conception is human life and being.
In 1974, he said, "I don't like the Supreme Court decision on abortion. I think it went too far."
I think it's always a tragedy, and I think that it should be rare and safe, and I think we should be focusing on how to limit the number of abortions.
On no fewer than 50 occasions, he'd voted against federal funding for abortions. The quote inside the April 7th, 1994 letter reads, "Those of us who are opposed to abortions should not be compelled to pay for them."
I don't support public funding. I don't, because that flips the burden. That's then telling me I have to accept a different view.
This is a guy who on the Judiciary Committee in 1982 voted for an amendment from Orrin Hatch that would allow states to ban abortion.
Abortion is always wrong.
This is from 1986, where he tells the Catholic Diocese newspaper that abortion is, quote, wrong from the moment of conception, and he praised pro-life groups for trying to push back the frontier on when abortion is legal.
I'm prepared as a matter of faith to accept that life begins at the moment of conception.
This is coming from the man who's given awards to Seal Richards, the former president of Planned Parenthood, and Ellie Schmiel, president of the feminist majority / non-majority network recently, and George Soros. So you may be wondering, what happened to Joe Biden? What happened to his pro-life statements? How did he get radicalized over the time? How did suddenly in 2016, then in 2019, and 2020, how did he make this massive flip-flop from being at least somewhat pro-life or being willing to defend his faith's pro-life teachings to becoming the most radical abortion president we've ever known, even more radical than Barack Obama? In politics, the answer is always very simple, folks. You don't need a degree in poli-sci to know this. Follow the money. My best guess is that Biden probably never really had a moral compass to begin with. He probably just said whatever made pocketbooks of donors open up to fund his campaigns, or what he thought the people who were electing him wanted. That's probably it. He's a politician. You gotta think about, what is the number one job of a politician? What's their goal? To win re-election, to stay in power. That's what he wants. And somewhere along the line, Joe Biden made a compromise, most likely with the leadership of the DNC, when he really, 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 really wanted to run for president, that he was going to change his stance on abortion. In the first half of 2024, before Kamala Harris took over the Democratic ticket and kicked Biden to the curb, Planned Parenthood had promised, they pledged openly $40 million to bolster Biden's reelection bid. In 2020, Planned Parenthood pledged even more money. And they're just one of the few mega donors here to pro-abortion candidates that dangled their checkbooks with pro-abortion stings attached. Biden was evidently very happy to comply and participate. If I were to summarize Joe Biden's failure on abortion in one line, it would be this. As president, Joe Biden prioritized his friends in the abortion industry over the lives and well-being of innocent Americans. He spent his presidency trying to make sure pro-life states could not protect their babies, expanding chemical abortion pills, which lead to injury, infertility, and death of women, are the drug of choice of sex abusers, and we know are polluting our drinking water, and prosecuting peaceful pro-life activists while turning a blind eye to pro-abortion terrorists. Watch my podcast last week about the FACE Act. I mean, he and his administration hated the Dobbs decision. From the moment the Dobbs decision came down on June 24, 2022, they were full on sprinting to fight back against states who wanted to then act and protect their preborn citizens. As soon as it was overturned, states like Texas, as soon as it was overturned, states like Texas, Indiana, West Virginia moved immediately to end abortion. So the Biden administration got to work trying to figure out how to stop this from happening. And they really got creative with federal powers to skirt states' authority to protect life. I mean, this is something I've been saying for the past few months. President Trump's now been saying, oh, abortion's not a federal issue. And really it is. And you don't have to look very far into Joe Biden's presidency to see all the ways they use the power of the federal government to push an abortion policy. They even formed a whole task force for this. Just one of the, I mean, there were things like, for example, the DOD, the Department of Defense, which is in a real pickle. You know, they've been prioritizing DEI. They let go of all of these servicemen and women who refuse to get the COVID vaccination. Like, we're in a real pickle if we get invaded today because of what our Department of Defense has been focusing on. One of the things they also focused on, Senator Tuberville fought against this courageously until the other GOP senators forced him to give in on this, because he was stopping military promotions as a way to stop, in the minority, you have to play kind of, politics to figure out how to get things done, to stop the DOD, because they actually implemented a policy at the DOD, the Department of Defense, to pay for, using taxpayer dollars, to force us to pay for military service members' abortions and family members of military service members who are deployed or at base, if they lived in like a pro-life state like Georgia, to go across state lines to have an abortion. That was what the DOD did immediately after the Dobbs decision, after Roe's reversal. The Department of Veterans Affairs. So we have Veterans Affairs, VA hospitals in, I think, almost every state across the country. These are hospitals where veteran service members can go and get care. It's not great care if you remember some of the scandals that have happened recently. But because these hospitals are operating in pro-life states, the Biden administration immediately told these VA hospitals, because these are federally controlled hospitals, to start committing abortions in pro-life states, saying, well, this is federal agency, federal land or whatever, so we can usurp the rule of law in the states. They literally forced the VAs to start committing abortions. That's what they did. The DOJ actually issued in June of 2023 a fact sheet and said, quote, the DOJ will support and provide representation to any VA providers whom states attempt to prosecute for violations of state abortion laws, where those providers are approximately carrying out their duties under the VA's interim final rule. Meaning, We want you to continue to commit abortions, even if you live in a state where abortions are prevented. And if you get prosecuted, the federal government is, in taxpayer funds, is going to come and defend you. This task force, the Interagency Task Force on Reproductive Health Care Access, was launched just weeks after the Dobbs decision. It included leadership really by the DOJ, the Attorney General, who was tasked with, quote, providing technical assistance to states affording legal protection to out-of-state patients, as well as providers who offer legal reproductive health care. Once again, using taxpayer dollars to use our Department of Justice to facilitate abortions in states that have moved to protect their preborn citizens. Tell me again how much Joe Biden cared about protecting democracy. At SFLA, we've been talking nonstop for the past several years about the federal expansion of chemical abortion pills. And that's what we saw in the Biden's FDA. If you all remember, right before the Dobbs decision was handed down, actually the month of the oral arguments of the Dobbs decision, so this was December 2021, if anyone had paid attention to the oral arguments, you knew the decision was probably going to come down pro-life. And so the FDA came out right before Christmas, ruined my complete Christmas, and said, you know what? We're just going to, because of COVID and health safety standards, it's too dangerous for women to go to abortion facilities to get their chemical abortion pills to kill their child, which, by the way, are also very dangerous. 15% of women who take these pills end up in the ER. Some studies are over 20%. So it's too dangerous because of COVID. So now she can get them via the mail. That opened up the floodgates on chemical abortion pills, meaning now rapists, sex predators, human traffickers can go online and order these pills, meaning women are getting the pills from random people in Mexico and India who they've never met, never had a physical examination for, never ensured they're not experiencing a life-threatening ectopic pregnancy, or ensuring that they don't have an RH incompatibility with they and their child's blood, which it can be different. By the way, I argue with people all the time on campus who say that the child has the exact same blood as the mother. Wrong. Go back to school on that one. Because if she has an RH incompatibility with the child and there's a commingling of blood during the abortion, a miscarriage, or birth, she may be rendered unable to ever carry another child to term. The Biden administration just forgot all of that and said, yeah, you shouldn't get pills over the counter and via mail, no testing, no follow-up. And that's what the Biden administration did. And women have died. Not only have babies, more babies have died, but mothers have died because of this rule from the FDA. The DOJ also refused to enforce the Federal Comstock Act, which has been law since 1890, which Democrats amended in the 60s to exclude birth control. But this law prevents the mailing of abortion-related materials. And the DOJ literally wrote a letter telling everybody, yeah, we're just not going to force it. It's like anarchy, that you're the DOJ, the highest law enforcement agency of the United States, and you just say you're just going to ignore laws that have been passed and have been enacted for decades. So the results are in, folks. Joe Biden failed. He failed women. He failed children. He failed the future of America. And now he leaves behind a trash legacy of failing to deliver America's promise of prosperity and freedom to the most vulnerable in our nation. He didn't have a moral compass. He simply went where the money was. Planned Parenthood promised him $40 million in 2024. And that's exactly, why he did it, to repay his funders and continue to keep money in the pockets from the abortion industry flowing to the Democratic National Committee. Just so you know, we have a right to protect our children from dangerous things online. This is my last topic for today. That statement, what I just said, should just be self-explanatory, and everyone should agree with that. But apparently the ACLU and other leftists don't agree with that. Right now, I want to talk about a super specific case that has broad implications on our society. It's coming out of Texas. It's called the Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton. Ken Paxton is the Attorney General of the state of Texas. So this is a case before the Supreme Court. The court is being asked to determine whether it is a violation of the First Amendment rights of adults to force online pornography sites to do an age verification in order to protect children from being exposed to sexually explicit content online. Their argument is by forcing adults to put in their ID to prove that they're an adult, they're not a minor before they watch pornography, it's limiting adults from watching pornography because that's an extra step to watching pornography. And so the ACLU, because they care more about porn and adults watching porn than they do children, is literally suing the state of Texas over this. Just think about that. In order to ensure it's easier for adults to consume pornography, they're putting aside and disregarding the fact that the goal is to protect children, minors, from pornography. Our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom explained what is at stake in this case. I'm going to read to you from one of their press releases. Quote, as the internet becomes easier and easier for minors to access, so does explicit material. Research shows that young people exposed to pornography suffer with increased rates of depression, anxiety, violent behavior, sexual promiscuity and abuse, trafficking, distorted views of relationships between men and women. Texas has every right to pass laws to protect children from these types of harms, and in no way do these laws tread on anyone's constitutionally protected freedom of speech. Our legal system recognizes that the government has a vested interest in regulating obscene material, and so we are arguing at the U.S. Supreme Court to allow Texas to protect children from the harmful effects of pornography. No matter how free speech laws are interpreted in the United States, the truth at the heart of this case is that children are being harmed by being exposed online. And that I'm a huge free speech advocate. Obviously, I'm testing the free speech every single time I walk onto a college campus. So I'm a pretty big free speech advocate. But we all know when you have rights, you have a duty to protect others. And there's some speech that is regulated. For example, yelling fire at a crowded movie theater that would cause a rush and a stampede that end the lives of people, you would get in trouble for that. Because the courts would and the law enforcement would say, yes, you had a right to say whatever you wanted, but you chose to use your speech to cause a stampede when it wasn't needed, if there's not a fire, and that ended the lives of human beings. You would be held responsible for the consequences of that speech. No rights are, limitless in our society, and that's just how it is. There's growing literature out there that proves that there is a real damage that pornography does to kids. According to a UK report in 2023, the younger children view pornography, the more likely they are to view it as they get older. And the more they view it as they get older, coupled with early exposure, the more likely they are to view violent content and ultimately engage in dangerous or degrading sex acts. Another 2023 study said the first time most kids see porn is on accident. They did not consent to seeking it or seeing it. They are stumbling onto porn on sites like Twitter, Snapchat, or being shown by friends. And kids often feel shame and confusion when seeing porn. The bottom line is that our kids should be protected from seeing porn. It's harmful to them. It interferes with parental rights and responsibilities that we have to teach our kids about sex and human dignity. And it creates a whole generation of new customers who perpetuate the cycle of sexual abuse and trafficking exploitation. Okay, so why am I talking about this on a pro-life show? I know I try to keep the topics on the show very much focused on saving lives and ending the atrocity of abortion. The reason I'm talking about this is because we in the pro-life movement find ourselves as the oldest and staunchest defenders of the fact that children deserve to be protected from harm. In the middle of a culture that's gone absolutely insane, it does not even seem to know what the level is anymore. For decades, we've been saying that children have dignity and it's wrong to kill them. We've been saying that children deserve to be protected. Most of all, be protected from by their parents, that the bond between parent and child is sacred, that the government does have a role to protect them, not harm them. Yet our culture does not seem to know this anymore. Our culture is actually grappling with questions about basic dignity and rights of children. We're divided on things like, whether it's wrong or right to mutilate and sterilize children in the name of gender ideology for the children who are suffering gender confusion. Whether it is wrong or right to euthanize children who suffer. Discussed that on last week's episode. Whether pedophilia is a legitimate form of love that children can consent to. Yes, this debate's going on. Whether children should be protected from pornographic sexual material online, which, by the way, leads to promiscuity, which will lead to more abortions. The reason none of these questions that we're debating should surprise us is because the greater question of whether it is wrong to violently dismember or starve a child in the womb simply because they're inconvenient via abortion has been an open question for more than 50 years, and we haven't answered that question yet. If you don't know it's wrong to kill a baby, a defenseless member of our species in the womb, then there's a really good chance you're going to be blurry on whether or not it's okay to harm one. So let me return to my previous point. You and I, dear pro-life friends, have known all along that children have innate value, and it's wrong to harm them always, and it's right to protect them always. This must be a basic fact to you and I, but our culture has lost touch with this, and it needs our voice to continue to bring people back to the ground of reality. If you care for kids in any capacity, as a parent, as a teacher, a grandparent, babysitter, physician, social worker, foster parent, the list goes on, you need to be aware of the threats that are facing our children today so you can protect those who've been entrusted to your care. So keep watching the case. I'm going to keep watching this case. It's the Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton as the Supreme Court hears oral arguments from both sides today. Thank you all for joining me today on this episode of the Kristan Hawkins podcast. Make sure you subscribe and follow along for more discussions like this. To hear from me daily on pro-life news that you need to know about, please join my personal text messaging line. You can just text the word Kristan, my name, to 53445. And I hope you've got your ticket to the National Pro-Life Summit that's coming up next Saturday, January 25th in Washington, D.C. It is sold out, but it will be live streamed on prolifesummit.org or Students for Life's Facebook page. Yes, Facebook pages are still a thing. If you tune into live stream, you'll hear from me, Charlie Kirk, Bethany Hamilton, Kellyanne McVaney, Dr. Ben Carlson. It is an all-star lineup. So make sure you tune in Saturday, January 25th. Put a reminder on your phone. About 9 a.m. Eastern is when things will get underway. I think I'm like one of the first speakers, so don't forget about that. So until next week, keep speaking up for the most voiceless and protecting our children, and stand for life.